Welcome back to another lecture. In this lecture, we're looking at cloud computing. What is cloud computing and what is a traditional cloud computing solution? And so first, let's take a look at what is cloud computing from a technical point of view. In a sense, for those who don't know yet, you have the concept of the local computing power or the machines that you have, and you want to move that computing power into the cloud, into somebody else's server. So your local computing infrastructure, your local computing power moves from your on-premise systems into the cloud, into somebody else's server. From a business point of view, you have a certain set of responsibilities that you used to have. But with a cloud provider, you can delegate these responsibilities to the cloud provider. And keep that in mind when you move from a company that has not had any exposure to cloud computing, or none of the systems are really running in the cloud, and you decided for many reasons, maybe from a business point of view, from a financial, from a cost operations perspective, to keep operations cost to a lower point, but maybe from a competitive edge perspective there, where you can gain certain things that you couldn't do before because of the power of the cloud. And so for whatever reasons you had or have, you want to move some of your systems, or one or two, maybe the core domain or some of the core systems that you have, from your on-premise installations and infrastructure into the cloud. And so there's a couple of ways of doing this. There's many ways of doing it, actually. And so one thing that I usually point out is that your existing operational personnel and staff needs as a minimum to go through not a lot of, but at least some training on what cloud computing is all about. How do you take an existing system and move it into the cloud? You can't just take it the way it is and just virtualize it and put it into the cloud. You're not really taking advantage of it. There are many aspects of that. But one thing I want to point out is the dev operations, the operations department, where when it comes to traditional cloud computing, you do definitely need to have a DevOps. Not that you don't have to, but the manpower and the staff required from a typical on-premise system will shift somewhat when you go into the cloud, simply because you are actually optimizing and streamlining your operations. And so you're delegating some of these responsibilities from the things that you used to have in-house with your own staff to the cloud provider. So your cloud provider, this is why you're paying them, is not just for getting access to the services and being able to build solutions, but also getting access to the staff that the cloud provider has 24/7, which in most cases you won't be able to compete with. And so it makes perfect business sense that the number of people you have to maintain your existing systems once you move them to the cloud should be reduced, actually at a point where you have very minimal need for DevOps personnel in the first place. I'll get to that a little bit later, why that is, especially with serverless computing. But keep that in mind, that your cloud provider should become your DevOps department, hopefully more and more. There's a certain risk involved, of course, when you do that. Like everything else, there's a compromise. But from a cost and from a streamline and from a competitive advantage, it makes a lot of sense that the cloud provider's staff to give you these services becomes part of your DevOps operations.